As we delve into the world of corporate governance and environmental policy, a new development has caught our eye: the SEC Climate Rule, a proposed regulation that could potentially reshape how corporations operate within the framework of environmental responsibility. Will this be a game changer or an unnecessary burden? Stay tuned as we decode the implications, the pros, the cons, and the overall impact on corporations. But before we dive in, if you're new here, welcome aboard. And if you like this content, please like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit that bell for notifications. And if you're a returning viewer, we're glad to have you back. Okay, let's get going. How might our planet's climate crisis redefine the corporate landscape, and what role does the SEC's rule play in this transformation? In the face of escalating global climate concerns, corporations worldwide are finding themselves at a crossroads. The decisions they make today could have far-reaching implications for our planet and future generations. Amid this backdrop, a new player has entered the scene: the SEC, or the Securities and Exchange Commission. They're considering a rule that could change the game. It's called the Enhancement and Standardization of Climate-Related Disclosures for Investors. This rule, if implemented, would mandate U.S. companies to disclose their climate impact, including emissions and climate risk management strategies. It's a response to the increasing demand from investors who want to make informed decisions, favoring companies that are proactive in mitigating climate risks. But it's not without its challenges. There are questions about the accuracy of sustainability claims, potential court challenges, and the scope of emissions to be disclosed. So what does all this mean for corporations, investors, and most importantly, our planet? Let's explore the intricacies of this rule and its potential implications. The SEC's rule could potentially be a game changer, but what exactly does it entail? Now imagine a world where corporations are held accountable for their impact on the environment. This is the reality the SEC is striving to create with its new rule. The rule's core aim is to mandate U.S. companies to disclose their climate impact. This isn't just about the smoke billowing from factories or the energy consumed in office buildings. The SEC is digging deeper, looking at Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Scope 1. Emissions are direct emissions from the company's operations, like the exhaust from company vehicles or the fumes from a company-owned power plant. Scope 2 emissions are indirect emissions, associated with the generation of purchased energy, such as electricity or heat. The third category, Scope 3 emissions, which is proposed to be excluded from the rule due to its complexity, are all other indirect emissions that occur in a company's value chain. This includes emissions from business travel, employee commuting, and even the extraction and production of purchased materials. By requiring companies to disclose these emissions, the SEC is essentially providing a roadmap for investors who want to make more environmentally conscious decisions. They can choose to invest in companies that are actively working to reduce their carbon footprint, or avoid those that are contributing heavily to climate change. This rule could also impact companies' internal strategies. With the full extent of their emissions out in the open, companies might feel a greater pressure to implement sustainable practices and reduce their environmental impact. But this is not just about saving the planet. The rule also has economic implications. Companies that fail to manage their climate risks could face financial repercussions, as investors might be less willing to invest in companies with high environmental risks. However, not everyone agrees with this new rule, but that's a conversation for our next scene. Many see the SEC's rule as a necessary step towards a sustainable future. For those in favor, this rule is seen as an essential tool in the fight against climate change. It's about transparency and accountability. It's about giving investors the information they need to make informed decisions. Consider this: investors are increasingly interested in companies that prioritize environmental, social, and governance factors, also known as ESG investing. By requiring companies to disclose their climate impact, investors can avoid those that are most likely to be affected by climate change. They can steer their capital towards businesses that are actively working to reduce their carbon footprint. The rule also encourages corporations to take a closer look at their operations. It's not just about direct emissions, that's Scope 1. It's also about indirect emissions from electricity use, that's Scope 2. And it's about emissions from the entire value chain, that's Scope 3. This isn't just about punishing companies. It's about rewarding those that are leading the way in sustainability. It's about creating a level playing field where businesses are judged not just on their profits, but on their impact on the planet. But as with any rule, there are also critics. Critics of the rule argue that it could have unintended consequences. At the heart of the opposition is the concern about the accuracy of sustainability claims. While companies may be eager to present their green credentials, the truth behind these claims can sometimes be murky. For instance, a company might tout its investment in renewable energy, but fail to disclose the carbon footprint of its supply chain. This creates a distorted picture of the company's actual environmental impact. The critics argue that without a robust system in place to verify these claims, we might end up with a scenario of greenwashing, where companies mislead investors by presenting a greener image than what truly exists. Another argument against the rule centers on potential court challenges. The rule would require companies to disclose not just their direct emissions, known as Scope 1, but also indirect emissions from both the production of purchased materials and energy, Scope 2, and from activities outside their direct control, such as those of their suppliers or customers, Scope 3. Critics argue that this could lead to legal disputes, as companies may challenge the fairness and feasibility of being held accountable for emissions outside their direct control. Also, some experts argue that the rule could inadvertently discourage innovation. They contend that strict disclosure requirements might deter companies from pursuing new but unproven sustainability initiatives for fear of not meeting the regulatory standards. Finally, there's the concern about the potential burden on smaller companies. Large corporations might have the resources to navigate these new requirements, but what about the small and medium-sized enterprises? Critics worry that the rule could disproportionately impact these smaller entities, potentially stifling their growth and competitiveness. So, what does this all mean for corporations? The potential impact of the SEC rule on corporations is monumental. It's a seismic shift that goes beyond mere compliance. It's about transparency, accountability, and ultimately, sustainability. This rule could set a new standard for how corporations interact with our planet. It encourages businesses to take a hard look at their emissions and climate risk management strategies. It's not just about the direct emissions a company produces, but also those generated indirectly, through their supply chain and the use of their products. There's a clear need for regulations that are not just effective but also enforceable. The challenge lies in creating rules that provide investors with vital information without creating loopholes for corporations to slip through. The arguments for and against the rule are complex and multifaceted. Yet, what's undeniable is that this rule, if implemented, could fundamentally change the way corporations operate, pushing them towards a more sustainable future. As the climate crisis continues to unfold, only time will tell how this rule will shape the corporate landscape.